there are two, this sort of first branch, this pre-K through elementary. We have two stations, both WITF TV, and that is the schedule that you'll see on the left. And then we have a 24-hour kids channel, not because we're advocating that children watch 24 hours of programming, but this does provide families with resources through atypical times of day. So if families are essential workers and they're trying to, and they're working during the day or working at night, there's some options for them as well if they want to co-view in this way. So we have then, now you go to the next row of schedules. We have broken out our daytime television schedule. This was a change started April 27th. Because what we had been doing for 6th through 12th grade students is focusing only on prime time. And that was, in some respects, a really big reach, some parts of it. So now we're specifically programming the hours of 2 to 5, specifically with middle school and high school students in mind. And so it is using programs that either are currently on the air that we've moved into this block, or programs that are in sort of the PBS archives, but really relevant to content. And so there is a science piece, there is a social studies piece, and there is the English language arts piece as well. Sort of the green is science, the yellowish, beigeish is social studies, and the blue is the language arts piece. And so this is updated. You can see the dates down the side, where the younger kids programs above don't change. Those are the programs that air each day. The ones below do change, and those 3 schedules will flex and change about every 2 weeks. So both the daytime, the prime time, and now we've started with our NPR schedule. That's the primetime one, and you'll see some blocks that don't get color coded on that one. Sorry, Ben, that don't get color coded on the primetime schedule. Not because, and this is a really good example of this one, not because there's not value in watching the George W. Bush American Experience documentary. That may be really important if you're working with particularly older children, but some of the content in that documentary had a pretty large advisory from PBS. And I mean, let's be honest, PBS is not HBO. So if PBS is saying, oh, I don't know, that could be just a flag. And we understand that kids may not be co-viewing these shows with their families. In that particular case, the George W. Bush one had both 9/11 very specific footage, as well as some prisoner Abu Ghraib kind of things that seemed to be a little outside of the realm of what we were comfortable saying, hey, a 6th grader could sit down and watch this by themselves. So there might still be other pieces of these programmings. The full blanks, the things you don't see at all, those are British comedies that we love, but didn't really see any sort of educational tie. But sometimes you'll see uncolor coded things, and that's not to say not to watch it, but that's just to say we wouldn't say, we probably wouldn't show this in a school. So if you can certainly take a look at that and see, check out your own judgment. But it's not because we don't recommend American Experience. It's just because this particular one had a lot of flags coming from PBS. And then if you want to switch to the NPR schedule, this particular schedule goes through our regular NPR programs. And some of these are really helpful, I think, for students. In particular, there's a 2 o'clock block that sort of switches off every day. It's Reveal and Innovation Hub, TED Radio Hour. Those shows are often very interesting and ties often specifically to science, particularly Science Friday, a lot with innovation. And so if you're working with older students where we might be missing the mark for very specific science concepts, NPR is bringing to us a lot of resources that might be helpful. And in some cases, this is, you know, something that you could recommend that students watch or listen to in this case, or, you know, perhaps in some way share that digitally with students who have access to that. And again, NPR, we're at 89.5 on the FM dial. Okay, so those were our first foray. And so we put these schedules out, and then we had Harrisburg City School District reached out and said, look, we have some ideas about and some concerns about access for our kids. How can we work a little closer? And so you want to click on school district curriculums. We now have 4 school districts that we're working closely with. Some of them, you know, might be friends, you know. So you can grab either of any of those schedules if you want to pull one up. Okay, so in this case, each schedule shifts in 2-week blocks. So we're currently in the April 27th through May 8th block. All of these are PDFs, as were the schedules that we talked about before. And that's at the request of teachers who in some cases wanted to download them, print them, send them, hand them out with grab-and-go lunch bags. All of that is an option. You can certainly do that. Or you can point people to the presence online. And these schedules are also PDFs that you can download as well. So if you just want to grab one, we're not going to go through probably all of them, but if you want to click on any of them. Okay, so basically what we did is we worked with Harrisburg City, and we thought about both aligning to standards and then who would use these schedules. So we thought, okay, teachers will use them and they're really familiar with standards, but families might use them too, and they might not be as familiar, even though we want them to be, they might not be as familiar with standards. And so we went with this concept of big ideas. And teachers, we feel that you guys can navigate a lot easier from the big idea to the standard than families could navigate from the standard to the big idea. So we went with that. Basically, we go per grade level with these big ideas that students are managing throughout the rest of the school year. These will change should we need to do this similar plan, and probably we will do some version of it depending on how things all shake out in the fall. And there might be some options for these in the summer as well. But these were the skills that students were working with through March 13th through the end of the year. And there was thought at one point of doing one skill at a time, like we would do word blending and then we'll work on fluency. And what I thought about was, look, we talk about differentiating instruction all the time. This is a way that can happen really easily. If kids are working at a slower pace, they can revisit ideas. If they're working ahead, they can indeed do that. So basically, the big ideas, it's the grade level in the first column, the big ideas in the second column, and then it is every show, every program that deals with this concept and when it actually airs on linear television, so on the TV. We've had requests from teachers. Now we've added the actual program name. So we had like the name of the show, Molly Denali. Now we have It's Molly Denali. Molly Ball is the name of the episode. And that was because some teachers were saying, okay, you know what I want? Okay, that's that, Molly. Yes, you got it. I want to be able to watch these digitally, like my kids do have access. And I don't want to say that they have to watch it at 7:30 p.m. I want to be able to email them a link, or I want to be able to tell them where to access it. So now we have the episode name. So it's not just the program name, the episode name, and then what the general sense of content is. Near each time, you'll see if it says WITF Kids, that means it's on the 24/7 channel. If it says WITF TV, that's on our regular station. And we go through grade 12. It starts in some respects to get a little sparser as we get a little older, which makes some level of sense. Oh, they're not in this one. This one's awesome. We have tried really hard to think about our high school friends. We do have really great, we call it general audience programming, but it's older person programming that isn't specifically PBS Kids related, but it's more, and again, you can see some of these pieces that we've pulled from that schedule that is in the afternoon, that daytime schedule, as well as our primetime schedule. So
Debbie,
yep.
So if a school district wanted to get involved, how can they do that?
Well, it's very, very easy. So for the most part, the 4 school districts we work with now have very similar, because the big ideas are standard based, they are really, really same. They're very similar. One of the school districts works a little bit more in project-based stuff. So they've asked us to think about that, and we are working on these sort of bigger ideas for Manheim Central that does like themes for their kindergarten through 4th grades classrooms. I think right now they're doing like zoology or something for their language arts stuff. So they were like, hey, if you can point us to more episodes related to that. So in the next couple, probably in the next week or so, it's not up yet, but in the next week or so, they'll have another bullet sort of underneath each grade K through 4 that will feature their specific topic area, the big topic area to study. If you are interested in having your schedule up or having a curriculum like this, what we've talked about is, even though the curriculums are very similar, we thought, families are going to feel a lot more comfortable going to their district as opposed to a general curriculum. So we really, basically all you do is email me and say, yeah, we want to be on board. We will customize that top bar where Ben is right now. We'll customize a spot in the navigation bar of the website, and we'll create one of those little blocks, just like you can see right here, for your school district. And if there are specific pieces as you look over that curriculum where you say, oh no, we are not, we're not interested in phonemic awareness, gosh darn it, and you don't want some part to appear, or you want something else to appear, within most cases we're able to customize that. Again, I think as we are thinking for the end of the year, I think that most of these things will work for most school districts. If we're looking at the fall, which we have no idea, right? Nobody knows anything at this point. If we need to move in that direction, I think we will be looking at probably more specific customization depending on, where school districts are going to start and what their goals are going to be for the, for the fall, which, everybody's guess. I think we're all trying to see a crystal ball that isn't present currently. So, that's kind of the footprint of the curriculum, and it tends to be working fairly well. In terms of like Harrisburg, who's really relying on it, they are using a journaling system where students are writing and drawing about what they've viewed. And I love PBS programming, but I'm married to a teacher, and my kids wish they were sitting, it's the first time ever probably they say they wish they were sitting in a classroom, but we know ideally this isn't, ideal, but we are trying really hard to put more tools in your toolbox so that you are able to help your students, especially students with really significant challenges in access, to be able to navigate some of these things. So any thoughts about curriculum before we move to the sort of the online resources?
And at this point, I just remind you can drop questions into the Q&A pod if you have them for Debbie. And we're gonna, in this second part, we're gonna explore some of the PBS resources that are available to you. But if you have questions specifically about the curriculum and how you can work with them, I know that Nicole posted your email address into the chat for folks as well, so they're welcome to reach out to you.
And I will just say what has been occurring is I just get an email. Yesterday we got an email from Manheim Central and they said, I think we might want to talk about this. And so we did a little Zoom, we talked about it, and their curriculum person said, okay, how long does this take? And we had them up about 2 hours later. So our team's really responsive, able to do some things. Again, we're going to be trying to customize their schedule a little bit more, and that'll be happening later. But in terms of being able to share this, and then you can certainly, we've had school districts tweet about it. We have had, I know Harrisburg's printed things and mailed them to houses. You know, however we can help with that process as well, we're certainly willing to do that.
So this has been a fantastic help. I know we're working with Debbie and her folks to also try and get the word out to schools about this. But in addition, we also know that there are these tremendous resources that PBS has. So in the second part, we're going to take a look at the PBS resources. We did have one question come in that says, can you show us how to send a link to students to watch a particular show online?
I can try. I am not the person that would know how to do that, but I can find out and get that information to Ben. I mean, my guess is that you would be able to go, if it's a PBS program, that you would be able to access that on PBS Kids, if it's a PBS Kids program. If it's a prime time program, that one I'd have to ask our programmer, because I don't actually know the answer to that, but I can find out.
And I think that when you look at the schedules, so once you've found a show that you want to watch, so if we find something, so these that are on WITF Kids, so if you navigate to that site, you'll be able to pull that link up, correct? Do I have
No,
that right?
that's our television station. That's actually the channel. So that's where it will be aired. And we do have on the site how to watch, like where to watch. But in terms, I mean, WITF Kids, PBS Kids is online. And so there are ways to watch those online. And there are archives, I know, but I'm not sure exactly how to tell you, like how do you find that link and how do you do that? I can find out.
So we'll share that information back out, and where we post this to the to both our YouTube channel and the LearnOn channel. Once we get that answer, we'll make sure that we include that information right there.
Yep.
All right, so now you want to take a look at the resources, Debbie?
Yeah, I think I saw a question about whether this was free or a subscription service there was Q&A. I think it popped up on my site.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I will just tell you, everything we offer is free. PBS has such a we at WITF have such a strange business model, right? We give everything away, and then later we're like, hey, would you like to support us with fundraising, like to the community? So no, this, by signing on or by utilizing our products, you're not, this is all free. And no one's going to say, hey, Manheim Central, now that you signed, would you like to be no one's going to do anything like that. The whole point of this is to get resources into the hands of kids legitimately. Every part of this could not be more free. So we're like, please use the programs. We would love to see that happen.
All right, so we're gonna,
yep. So again, I will tell you, those top bars, they'll disappear. We'll have a different monthly theme starting Friday, and then Ken Burns will go away. I just wanted to show you that we can do stuff like that. So if there is something you come across that you're like, oh, this is really wonderful, and teachers would really benefit from that, I would, we're happy to talk about those kinds of things. The first thing I'd like to talk about, though, is PBS LearningMedia. So if you're not familiar with this resource, this is by far, to me, one of the best things that PBS brings to families, to families and teachers, but teachers in particular. So PBS LearningMedia is basically like if you picture it like a warehouse of all PBS programs, from younger student programs to older kid programs. And you can navigate through this site by grade level, by content area, and by specific content topic. And so you can also, it's all to standards. So basically, if you wanted to do something on weather, you could search for weather, you could search by grade level, and it'll pull that all up for you. And then it is lesson specific. So it has lesson plans, it has lesson plans to standard, it goes through both national programs and member station programs. So if Boston, if the public media station in Boston has created content, you can see that content here. You can find lesson plans again, and it's all to standard, and it is for grade levels pre-K through 12th. Well, it always says 12 plus, but for older students as well. So it is a great resource. I've had people say, hey, can you do a webinar on this? You don't need a webinar on this. It's really, really user-friendly. People tease me at work all the time that I am not the tech person. Shocker. Thanks, Ben, for navigating for me. But I find this to be incredibly easy to use. It's one of those things that once you start looking through it, you're able to find other things. There are plenty of other ways you can use this. There's a whole student section. There's different teacher tools. But for me, the way I have recommended that folks use this site is to help sort of mesh the learning and PBS show in one sort of place. And this is good for bricks and mortar when we're back in our classrooms. This is good for online, and this is a site, I am fairly sure, I've not done this myself, but that you can create like watch lists and things like that for students. So those of you who want to explore this a little bit more, there is a ton of stuff to do on the site. To me, it's the one thing that PBS doesn't do a good job telling the story about, because it's such a great resource that people have spent so much time building, and it's really, really user-friendly. So if you want to explore that, and there are things, if you have questions specifically about learning media, I can direct you to the folks that actually manage learning media, and they're not local, the national folks that do that, but I can help get answers to very specific questions related to that. One piece I wanted to share is under PBS Kids, each week, if you click on that WITF featured weekly activities, this is more of a K through 2, second grade kind of thing. Every week we do a PDF like this that features a content area. So we always do, math on Monday and science on Tuesday. It's always the same content area. We choose a show, a program that is on air. We say what the episode name is, and we say what the focus area is, sort of that big idea. And then we give a suggestion for an activity that families could do together at home that does not require them to have any specific supplies. Though we are working really hard to create supply bags that we're trying to get some funding for, that we hope to be able to do before the end of the summer, to drop off some supplies at some school districts to give away during their lunch grab and go pickups, because we know that some kids, they just don't have these supplies, like a lot of supplies to do activities at home right now. And so we're trying to supplant that. But in the meantime, those are activities that families can do together pretty easily. If you scroll down a little bit more, we have, there's great resources. There's a lot of apps. There are great resources for families. So if you're trying to do family engagement, even though it says PBS parents, and we try really hard to say families, not parents, but this has some really great articles that you can share with families that are helpful if you're trying to do engagement that way. And then we have just built out this read-along section. PBS has been featuring a number of authors and producers that are tied to our programming. So like Arthur and Mark Brown, and the author of Pinkalicious, who does, we have a program based on that. Chris Chris Kratt from the Kratt brothers. Like, these are stories that kind of have been popping up on Facebook. We've tried to put them in one place. You may have seen Michelle Obama. Her latest is not up here yet, but those are books just in links to a publishing company. Those aren't our texts, but because she is working with PBS to do those read alouds, we're able to share those as well. It's a fun little thing that you can share with students to hear some of these folks that are tied specifically, like Mark Brown telling his own story. That's kind of fun. So that's there. You'll see references if we go a little further. This is sort of the last row for the Sesame Street, Meet the Helpers, Design Squad Global. Those are sort of the last row for younger students. We tried to pull these items together. Sesame Street has some great things. Obviously, Sesame Workshop is still such a wealth of great information for younger students. This Meet the Helpers site has a really interesting backstory. They started building this after the shooting in Orlando at the bar, and they realized that there just weren't resources for children about navigating trauma in their community, and so they started building this site called Meet the Helpers. And there are coronavirus COVID-19 resources, but they are resources related to anything, like what does a 911 operator do? What are these helpers in our community? How do they keep us healthy and safe? And so what to do in an emergency is basically the site. And we know a lot of our kids are going to be navigating really big feelings around what's happening now and other issues that have happened in their communities in the past and probably will continue to happen. So this is a really rich site with really an interesting organic sort of backstory. So below these resources, we start to get into a couple of older student resources. I'll just point out, you don't have to navigate there. The NPR Student Podcast Challenge is over. They do it every year to encourage students to do podcasts. The only reason it's still living on the site is because there's a series of videos made for students on how to build a podcast. And I thought that was really valuable. If that was something you wanted to do with older students, these videos could be helpful. Even though the contest this year has ended, it might still be an interesting learning tool. And then I will just point out the Pennsylvania history, the explorepahistory.com. The site is so dated. But in the past, WITF, before I got there, had created this site that teaches Pennsylvania history tied to historical markers, sort of those big markers that you see when you're driving down a highway or a road. And it is an interesting approach, in my opinion, to PA history. And so it is not a particularly friendly navigational sort of site, but it is a pretty amazing space to have all this information. And so if that's something that interests you, you can certainly look there. And actually the person that built and researched that site is actually still a WITF employee. And so if there are questions, I can certainly direct you to him. So in terms of these blocks, these are kind of the featured ones we're working with. These we feel like can change and can expand. And again, we are still learning and trying really hard to be able to make all these things the most useful to families and to teachers. And, we hope that these resources will help you do the very important work of what you're doing, which is, trying to help students of all ages navigate a really tricky time and to support families as well. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you for continuing to try to learn more for students and help them. And I appreciate your work. So so that's all I have. Are there other questions?
So I just want to thank you, Debbie. And as we start to wrap up this, We want to make sure that if you do have questions, please populate them in. I know that the one question we still have open is how do you send a link to students? Nicole has been looking. We know that we can certainly point them towards PBS Kids. Thank you so much. I wanted to go back to this. And thank Debbie. So once again, for a couple of things. One is, hopefully you can see the rich resources that PBS has. And you should not look at this as, how do I finish out the school year? You should be thinking about this in the long term, the big picture of, how can I use PBS to accentuate the learning that's taking place for my students? And so regardless of how we come back to school and what that might look like, I think that Debbie's done a great job of showing you, here are some content resources that can extend your classroom. So thinking about the fact that, when kids go home at night, they might be able to engage in additional learning over the summer, weekends. There's all kinds of ways that we can engage them, even if they're not online. So Debbie's information is here so that you can take a look. I know that Nicole popped in a link that will take you to Super Y. She has the information there. I'm going to click on that link real quick and just open it up so that you can take a look. And this is the live TV section. And I'm going to mute my site, so hopefully you don't hear the audio going as it's playing. And so she says, if you click to the right tab, and I don't know, Nicole, if you want to unmute if I'm not looking.
Tab there. So if you look, it says live TV at the top. All of those round circles are all of the different shows. So if you pull out the tab there by clicking on those 3 lines, you can pull them all out and look at it by show.
Perfect. So
thank you.
Yeah, so I'm at PBS Kids, and you can see it says live TV here, but and my kids are older, so I don't know that I recognize all the characters, but I know Curious George. So like if I click on Curious George, it pulls that out. But then when I open it up, all those episodes are there, and so so you can start to scroll down through, and that's how you'll navigate to those specific episodes.
The other thing I was thinking of, I'm sorry, the other thing I was thinking of too is that LearningMedia also houses those programming clips. I feel like it might be more difficult to find them because you would have to really poke around. Although I don't know if you could search, I'm not sure if you could search by the episode name, but they're the older, not the ones that are currently coming out, the newer episodes, but older episodes that we still air, because we still air a number of those. Those would also be, that would be another place to look. But in terms of being able to share in particular, like a NOVA episode, I'm gonna ask our programmer how that would work, or if that's not, that part's not even possible. I don't know.
So thanks, Debbie. Once again, we put in the slide deck. So the slide deck is there. What we really did was put links in to some of those different pieces. Like you can get a daily newsletter to PBS Kids. How do you access it? The weekly schedule that's up. So these are just quick links that if you're looking for one page, this page will take you to lots of the different resources. We gave you some samples of ELA, math, and science curriculum content schedules. So that's why we put that in there for you. And also when you go through and you take a look, I know that this was shared out for us, especially like here are shows that are dealing with different topics. And so, again, just as a placeholder for you to consider the use of PBS Kids and the learning goals that are associated with some of those different shows. So the last thing is just to remind you that you can continue to see the LearnOn resources for our website. If I scroll over, you'll continue to see webinars. And even though we are no longer doing the Act 48 credit, and you can see that it says by April 30th, but my little secret to you guys is we'll keep it open through Friday, especially for this webinar here, so that you can continue to earn Act 48 credit. But our schedule is here for upcoming events, and we will continue to add on LIU webinars as we go through the month of May and we start to bring this year to a close. The final piece is that we will pop the evaluation in, and we'd love for you guys to give us feedback there so that we can take a look at it. And then also the Act 48 credit at the bottom, you'll see those come up as well, and those will be opportunities for you to get to do that. We did get a question, I think it's a comment, is the easiest way to use the shows as learning activities, would it be to assign the students to watch a certain show? So Debbie, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
Well, I mean, I think it really depends on your students and their level of access and your own preference related to teaching. I think the programming has a role in lots of different ways. I think you absolutely could utilize programs as like a reteaching kind of concept. In fact, in some respects, I think that's more ideal. That you've provided some conversation, some interaction as a teacher around a topic or a subject. And then you're saying, okay, you could go home, you could watch this episode, you could go home, you could go downstairs, you could watch this episode, and we'll talk about it. We'll revisit that content in a Zoom meeting, on Friday or whatever. I like that approach. I know that some teachers are utilizing it to be able to just to share individual smaller concepts, or as like something fun to do with your family. You could go ahead and co-view these. PBS does its best work when it's in co-viewing, in particular with younger children, when there is an adult watching with them. We know that that is not always a possibility ever, and certainly not now when lots of adults are trying to do, like they're doing what I'm doing, right? We're working from home, just what you're doing as well. So I think that there are lots of options, but ideally the programming would be used to reinforce concepts, not introduce them. But I think for older students as well, it really does give some, I know one school district I've talked to is looking at this as being, they're looking at their curriculum as independent, collaborative, and then in-person instruction, so that there are things that students will be pursuing. A documentary they might watch. WITF did a whole series on PA conservationists, which is a really interesting topic. Feels timely with Earth Day and May. So they'll be recommending that students watch one of those documentaries and then do research on a conservationist of their own. So I think I think these tools provide a framework as much as you want them to, but just like everything else in education, we know there's an art and a science, right? And so the art part is how you as a teacher would love or would like to utilize those materials.
And I really like the idea, Debbie, that you shared with Harrisburg City, that they're keeping journals. So having kids keeping learning journals, I think, is another great way, so that students aren't just watching for the entertainment, but they should, what did you get out of this? And so very often I'll ask very simple questions. What did you learn? How did you find out what you learned? Or things like that can prompt. Those types of prompts can allow you to sort of check in with students. And if they are truly offline, if they're keeping a learning journal, they could submit that to you as evidence of what they were doing. So,
I mean, I think we know as teachers, right, that students who are just receiving information that they're not reflecting on, whether that's a lecture in person in a classroom or a program, that is not the best situation. We know that students who can reflect on what they're learning actually make that learning theirs, right? It becomes something that they can think about and apply. And so I certainly think that reflection is a challenging thing in the classroom. It's hard to do. And I don't know that it's easier in any way at home, but any sort of ideas we can give to each other about having students to reflect on what the work that they're doing at home, instead of just moving, not just related to PBS, but I'm talking about my own daughters doing their work online as well, to be able to not just check the box, I completed the assignment, but what does that assignment mean? What am I supposed to be, not supposed to be, what does that mean to me personally? What can I do with that information?
And we did get another question, which was, could a teacher assign a video to watch and put it in their Google Classroom? And I think I can help with the tech side of that, which is that if you're going to like PBS Kids, I don't know that that necessarily integrates into Google Classroom, but you can send the link. So as Nicole sort of showed us, you can run out and you can grab the link and you can put that link into Google Classroom. But if you're using PBS LearningMedia, it does sync with Google Classroom. And so the videos that you're watching, you'll be able to do that. Now you'll have to create an account. And so if you go, I'm going to go to the main page. What you'll see is you can sign up here. And if you're going to use Google Classroom, you'd want to sign in with your Google account. And once you do that, that'll allow you to assign those videos. So as you see, I scroll back down, you can, then you can save and organize your materials, and you can sync classrooms. And I believe you can actually create a class within PBS LearningMedia that'll allow you to interact with your students. So those are 3 good ways that you can start to do it, whether you're just giving them a link, you're syncing with Classroom, or you're managing your class in PBS LearningMedia.
I will also share that sort of our next step, and one of the things we hope to work with our IU friends on is marrying these 2 things. So that there would be programming and then all the pieces around learning media, that those things can all work together. And that's sort of our next frontier, our next thing we're thinking of. And I will say, again, if you have ideas, if you're like, you know what, it would really make this work for me is this, please feel free to share those. And that's not to say we can do them, but it is to say that we're open to it. We're recognizing the fact that none of us know, which is both scary and freeing, right? Both, right? This idea that it's terrifying that we don't know, but also, okay, well, what if we try it? I think that those are living sort of parallel to each other.
So I dropped my email into the chat for those that want to reach out if you have ideas that you want us as an IU to be working on, because remember that WITF actually serves a larger area than just York, Adams, and Franklin County. And hopefully we have some folks that might be from outside of there. But we're working with both IU13, which covers Lancaster, Lebanon, and IU15, which covers a large portion of the WITF viewing area north of Harrisburg. And so it's not just our viewing area, but I know Debbie's happy to work with you, and I'm happy to help as well, because we look at this, as I said, as a long-term partnership, and we're really excited about the prospects of the way that we can make use of these resources. So thank you guys very much. And Debbie, once again, thank you so much for sharing all those rich resources that we see out in WITF. We really appreciate your time and sharing that with us, but don't hesitate to reach out to her if you want to continue on.
If you're outside the area, I can certainly connect you to the education coordinator. If you're in Pennsylvania, I know all of those people. And if you're outside of the area, outside of the state even, I'm happy to do some research and find who your station is and who can help you, because everyone is trying.
And you can see there is some overlap in some areas for the viewing areas, but we've been on calls with PBS. In fact, we have one again today, and the cooperation that is happening amongst everybody has been fantastic. And I heard Debbie talk about how, like if a PBS station in Boston puts something out, that will be pulled into PBS media. So we see a great collaboration there, and PBS has been a wonderful partner for us, so we appreciate that. So with that, we're going to end the webinar. I'll just remind you again that if you want your Act 48 credit, we did drop the link in, but you can complete the form. You'll need to do that, complete that form no later than tomorrow to be able to get your Act 48 credit. Other than that, we thank you guys so much for joining us, and we look forward to continuing to learn on with everybody as we go into the month of May. Thanks.